Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
With cocaine, one snort, and it just owned my body and soul. Something in my system wanted that, and once cocaine was there, it was like the missing link. Click. Like when you turn on lights, it's on or off. There's no halfway. Cocaine was like my on switch. Stephen King. Some people understand that feeling of an on switch that Stephen King describes. It's a need, a compulsion, an overwhelming drive for some of us who dared to dance with the allure of a substance that could make us forget our pain, suffering, grief, and heartache. It's a dance with the devil that some of us sign willingly, knowing that the next big hit, the next big high, could be our last, but still doing it anyway. Still chasing that dream in hopes of leaving ourselves behind and losing oneself to the drift of a high. Some of us come away from the chase, realizing that at some point, something has to change. Something has to give, or we will lose our lives to following that high. Some of us are never able to stop. Never able to stop the pursuit of that demon that lures us in with promises of escaping the prisons of our lives. Join us for our upcoming series on the struggles of addiction, and where we explore our very human need to escape our lives and fall down into the spiral of drugs and alcoholism, even if that spiral may one day lead to our very own demise at the hands of a compulsion we cannot control. If you or a loved one has been struggling with addiction or has in the past, and would like to share your story, please feel free to reach out to me via social media or through email at juryroompodcast@gmail.com. Welcome to Addicted, a Jury Room production, coming soon to wherever you listen to this podcast.
Hey there, this is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast, and it's not suitable for children. It's a true crime show. I talk about murder. This show also might not be suitable for some adults either. Swearing is my second language. I excel at it. Don't say I didn't warn ya. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow. True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ, and I'm co-founder of Darkcast Network. And we just added more shows. There's 28 of us now. Beyond the Rainbow is a one-woman researched, written, recorded, and edited production. Why, you ask? Because I love you. And should you feel so compelled to return the love, I have a Buy Me a Coffee /Rainbow Crimes account. I am on all the social medias because I'm a social butterfly. Find me on Facebook at Beyond the Rainbow and just about everywhere else as Rainbow Crimes. Stop in and say hi, but make sure you use my name, otherwise I might think you're a scammer. Also be sure to check out my website at beyondtherainbowpodcast.com. Coming up on October 8th and 9th, I will be at my first ever True Crime Festival. It's called the Pacific Northwest True Crime Festival, and it'll be in Auburn, Washington, which is really close to Seattle. I'll post a link to the festival in my show notes, just in case you might be interested, and I hope you are interested. I would love it if you'd come to the event, and then I could meet you. Again, the dates will be October 8th and 9th. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. I am very excited to have my little sister podcast, Freaky as Fuck, host Syrai, collaborating this episode with me. Trust me, this case is truly freaky as fuck, and it goes way beyond the rainbow as far as crimes committed. In this episode, there's murders, fraud, a murder-suicide, and a missing child. So as you hear, we have a lot of stories within our main story, and tons of twists and turns. So what are we waiting for? Get your snacks ready, buckle in, hold on tight, 'cause this is going to be a bumpy ride. This ain't your grandma's hoopty we're riding in. At 56 years old, living in Post Falls, Idaho, being a newspaper boy for the past 3.5 years wasn't really Gary Loesch's calling. Still, he did it. Jobs were sparse and he had bills to pay. It was the wee hours of the morning. It was still very dark that fateful day in November 1995. Gary was out delivering the papers via his car. He was driving down a tree-lined gravel road. Before each driveway, he would stop. He would roll down his window, and then he would shove a newspaper into the plastic newspaper cubby that was at the end of the home's driveway. He got to one of the plastic newspaper cubbies, rolled down his window, put the newspaper in, but before he could roll his window back up, Gary had been shot in his head. And that shot immediately killed him. Down the road, a man and his girlfriend were startled awake by what sounded like a gunshot. They looked out the windows of their mobile home, but they didn't see anything of interest. They did hear the sound of car tires peeling out on gravel a little ways away, but nothing other than that. So they climbed back in bed and went to sleep again. When they awoke a little bit later, it was almost 6 a.m. They looked out the window yet again and they saw Gary's car in the middle of the road. The inside light was on, and the window appeared rolled down. The man who was looking out the window thought it was odd that the window was down. It was raining outside. He decided he'd keep his eye on the car for a little while. After an hour of checking to see if it was still there, the man decided to call the police. Police came out and they found Gary's body slumped in his car. There was very little physical evidence at the crime scene. There was no murder weapon. There were no shell casings. There were some tire tracks and a witness who later came forward and said, yes, they had seen a white pickup truck peeling out down the gravel road right after the gunshot sound. They didn't know the make or the model of the truck, nor did they get a license number or see who was in the truck. So this left a lot of questions. Who had murdered this man? This husband, this father, this grandfather? He wasn't carrying any money. Newspaper deliverers didn't carry money, only the newspaper. So what then, and why? The answer to that question came many years later.
3 years after Gary's murder, tragedy again strikes the Loesch family. Gary's wife, Barbara, would die a dramatic death in the family's hot tub. Barbara was found floating in the tub with a small unplugged television in the water with her. Police ruled her death accidental electrocution. But was it? It would seem Gary and Barbara's daughter Tina had taken a $500,000 life insurance policy out on her mother, in which she collected upon. Was Tina her parents' killer? Well, good question. We don't know yet, but keep listening. We'll figure it all out together. Tina Loesch was 27 years old when her mother died in that hot tub. Tina had a son named Christopher, who was 9 years old when his grandmother passed away. While researching, we found a blog of sorts by Tina's older brother. In the blog, he gives some interesting insights into who his sister was. He said, Tina was pampered to the point of being spoiled by their parents. He basically said Tina would manipulate her parents into getting what she wanted and getting out of what she didn't want to do. At the age of 16, Tina was into the bad boys. In high school, she was considered very pretty and would turn the heads of almost all the boys in school. But she wasn't interested in the football quarterback or the basketball captain. She was all about the rowdy teenage delinquents. And that's who Tina started to hang out with. It didn't take long for her grades to drop or for her to start getting into trouble. She began to steal from her parents, and they busted her and laid down some strict ground rules that weren't to Tina's liking. By her senior year of high school, she rebelled against her parents, quit school, and ran away. Tina had quite a few failed relationships while in the world on her own. At the age of 18 is when she got pregnant and gave birth to her son Christopher. Tina never identified who Christopher's father was, although she maybe didn't know, and that's always a strong possibility. Tina didn't let being a mother slow her down. She'd still party and be wildin'. Couch surfing with her infant son was her way of life. Tina was arrested for check forgery and fraud. When she was put in prison, Christopher was sent to live with Tina's parents. Tina actually was a small fish in a large pond of violent offenders in prison. Her petty theft and weed smoking was trifling compared to the other seasoned criminals incarcerated. But it was here in prison, Tina found comfort in the arms of another woman, a woman by the name of Skye Hanson. Skye was about 7 years older than Tina, had been in prison for several years before Tina was put in, and Skye was considered a force to be reckoned with. Skye was aggressive, controlling, and manipulative. Skye was also a lesbian. On the outside of prison, she was a drug dealer, which is why she was now on the inside of prison. She was busted for making and selling drugs. New inmate Tina was placed inside Skye's cell. She was to be Skye's cellmate. She quickly became much more than that. Skye was immediately attracted to Tina, and Tina was attracted to Skye's bad girl vibe. They both shared the love of money, trouble, and adrenaline.
Tina finished out the 2-year sentence she was to serve, and when she was released, she took back her now 2-year-old Christopher, and she found a little place to rent near Skye's hometown of Lewiston, Idaho. Tina was now really trying to stay out of trouble. She didn't want to end up back in prison. She was also trying to make amends with her parents. They were thrilled their princess was trying to get her shit together. Tina tried at first to hide the fact that she was in a lesbian relationship from her parents. She knew they wouldn't approve. Idaho's a very conservative state, and many parts are not too accepting of LGBTQ+ members. A few months later, Skye would be paroled, and then she would join her love Tina near Lewiston. Their relationship picked up right where it left off in prison. The two women decided to start a business together. Turns out after being incarcerated, it's tough to find real legitimate work. Since no one seemed to be too excited to hire either one of them, they became their own bosses, doing small-scale home repairs. If their workload got to be too heavy, Skye would hire in one of her former drug buddies, a guy by the name of Brad Steckman. Turns out Brad could do drywall work, something the ladies were not skilled at. Things really seemed to be looking up for Tina. At least the outwardly appearance told that story. That was until August 1995, when Tina's dad Gary was out delivering newspapers one morning, and he was murdered. And then Tina's mom died on January 11th, 1998. On January 11th, when Tina's mom Barbara died, friends of Barbara's went to check on her that morning, and it was because she had not been answering her phone the night before, or the morning of. When they got to Barbara's house, the doors were wide open. The dogs were out and the windows were open. This was January in Idaho. We're talking hella cold weather. This was not right. The friends decided not to go in, but rather to call the police. When the police showed up, they found Barbara in the hot tub, and there was a small television in the hot tub with her. Even though they ruled her death an accident, detectives never let go of the case. It just didn't quite make sense. The television cord wasn't long enough to reach the hot tub and unplug itself from the wall. Therefore, it had to be put there by someone else who unplugged it. And that came back to make them question, how did Barbara Loesch really die? They even looked back at Gary Loesch's murder. Police then kind of just decided a vendetta against Gary and Barbara must have been what was going on.
Detectives decided it was time to talk to friends of Gary and Barbara's because they had gotten really no answers from Tina and her brother. Once the detectives started talking to the friends, a whole other avenue of possibilities opened up for them. According to the friends, Gary and his daughter Tina had a strained relationship at best. It seemed once Gary learned his daughter's former cellmate and now new business partner was much more to his daughter, he wasn't very accepting. Not to mention, Skye would press Gary hard for money. Gary and Barbara didn't like Skye at all. She was manipulative, pushy, and they definitely didn't like her for their daughter. But the more Gary and Barbara protested Tina being with Skye, the stronger the bond between Tina and Skye grew. Tina's loyalty was for Skye only now. She even cut her parents off from seeing her son, Christopher. Out of desperation, Gary made an offer to Tina. He offered her a good amount of money to leave Skye and come back with Christopher. Tina pretty much told her dad to fuck off. There was no way in hell she would ever leave Skye. Gary felt he had no choice. He banished Tina from the family. In his and Barbara's will, they left their estate to their son, Tina's brother, and they left Tina $1. It was a final slap in the face for her choosing Skye over her family. While Tina and Skye would speak to detectives about Gary's murder, they spoke to detectives only a couple of times about Barbara. Soon they flat out wouldn't cooperate with law enforcement when it came to Barbara's death. Even though Barbara's passing was called an accident, detectives believed there was much more to her death. They continued to keep their eye on Tina and Skye, but the women had since lawyered up. And now, detectives could only speak to them through their attorney. Their attorney kept calling the coroner on Tina and Skye's behalf to find out what the holdup on the death certificate was. The attorney called daily until Tina finally had it in hand. Detectives were wondering why they were in such a hurry to get the death certificate. The answer was simple. Tina couldn't collect on the $500,000 life insurance she took out on her mom if she didn't have that death certificate. The policy had matured just weeks before Barbara died. Again, there was nothing to connect Tina and Skye to the murder of Gary or Barbara. But detectives were sure these weren't random tragedies for this family. After Tina and Skye received their $500,000 from the insurance company, detectives in Post Falls, Idaho received a call from a police department in Pullman, Washington. Pullman is very close to where Tina and Skye lived. It would seem the Pullman Police Department had someone in their custody with intel on Barbara's death. The guy they had in custody was Brad Steckman. Remember him? He was the drywall guy that sometimes worked for Tina and Skye. He was Skye's old drug buddy. Brad was arrested for the murder of an 89-year-old woman. The murder had happened several years earlier in 1996. But it would seem Brad's wife reported him when she found a huge diamond ring that belonged to the murdered woman. Brad decided it was in his best interest to win brownie points with the district attorney's office. He confessed to the murder of the elderly woman, and was ready to rat out a couple he knew for other crimes so he could get a plea deal. Brad also confessed to having a hand in Gary and Barbara Loesch's murders.
According to Brad, none of the murders were his idea. He was just a hired gun. His boss? Skye Hanson. She was the mastermind behind the murders of Gary and Barbara, and the 89-year-old woman he killed. Tina, of course, was involved as well. Brad said after Gary had disowned Tina, she was pissed, and this made Skye even more upset. That's when Skye devised a plan to get rid of Gary first, and then to score money from them by offing Barbara. Brad said he was the one to do the scouting of Gary's paper route, and he gave the information to Skye and Tina. And that's when the two ladies went and took care of Gary. He said he wasn't sure which one shot Gary, but if he had to guess, it was Skye. Brad said she was more of a hardened criminal than Tina. Brad continued to blab to the police. He said that Tina knew every night Barbara would use the hot tub because she had a bad back. Tina had even gotten her mom a small television set so she could watch shows while she was in the hot tub. It was all very well planned out. The night of Barbara's murder, Skye stayed home, while Tina and Brad went to Barbara's home in Post Falls. Tina introduced Brad as an old friend. Barbara excitedly said, "Hey, my favorite shows are on. Let's get in the hot tub and watch." Tina made cocktails for everyone. After the first cocktail in the hot tub, Brad got out and excused himself to use the bathroom. Tina also got out, saying she was going to make more cocktails. This was Brad's cue to go and knock the TV into the tub, which he did. There was a spark from the television with enough voltage to render Barbara unconscious, but it didn't kill her. Brad, in a panic, unplugged the TV and he yelled for Tina. He told her that her mom was still alive. Tina held Barbara's head under water until her mother had drowned. A couple of years had passed, and even though detectives still thought Tina and Skye were persons of interest in both of Tina's parents' murders, they still had nothing solid to bring them in. Brad also said Skye and Tina were involved in the murder and robbery of the elderly woman, the one he was arrested for killing. Brad told detectives the elderly lady was a client of Skye and Tina's. Tina had seen the woman's flashy diamond ring and told Skye she wanted her to steal it for her. Skye, wanting to give her woman anything she desired, hired Brad to break in and steal the ring. And then she told him to cover it up by any means necessary so her and Tina didn't get in trouble for it. Brad didn't count on his wife finding the ring and turning him in. Brad was also promised $10,000 for doing the job, but Skye and Tina never paid him. When detectives went to bring Tina and Skye in for questioning, they found that the women and Tina's son Christopher had vanished. This was in May 2001. The women had removed Christopher from school, and that was the last sighting anyone is aware of. Christopher was 11 at the time.
An all-points bulletin was put out for Skye, Tina, and Christopher across the nation by the Post Falls Police Department. No one knew where the couple and Christopher went. If Christopher was enrolled in a school, it wasn't with his real name. Nobody knew who Christopher's father was either, as we had mentioned earlier in the story, but Christopher was living with friends of Tina's and Skye's. It was a couple in Washington. Steve Cassell was a real estate advisor for Skye, and his girlfriend Julie Twyford was an attorney who helped Tina get her mom's life insurance settlement money. Tina and Skye plugged him from Steve and Julie's home and took him with them. And no one has seen Christopher since. If he is still alive, he'd be 31 years old today. When Christopher was in school, he was in under the name Christopher Robinson in Spokane Valley in Washington. If he had been transferred to another school, His transcripts were never requested from his law school. It's speculated his mom and Skye may have homeschooled him. While the search for Tina, Skye, and Christopher was on, things in Washington state were heating up for Brad Steckman. He was getting ready to go to trial for the murder and robbery of the 89-year-old woman. If you recall, Brad pleaded guilty, and a jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years up to life in prison. In 2008, Post Falls police had no idea where Tina, Skye, and Christopher had went, but with the 10th anniversary of Barbara's death, the police finally requested help from the FBI, who put out a national arrest warrant for the women. Now that the women were on the FBI's most wanted fugitive list, John Walsh of the television show America's Most Wanted was going to cover the case of the missing women and Christopher.
Within 3 hours of America's Most Wanted airing with Tina, Skye, and Christopher's story, there were 2 guys out in the desert of Tucson, Arizona drinking. They came upon what appeared to be an abandoned white Dodge Durango. Inside it were 2 dead women with gunshot wounds to their heads. The women were Tina and Skye. They had entered into a murder-suicide pact. Tina was to first shoot and kill Skye and then turn the gun on herself. A suicide letter was found in the car, but it left no indication of where or what happened to Christopher. If you might know anything that happened to Christopher, please contact the Post Falls Police in Idaho. There are pictures of Christopher on the Beyond the Rainbow website, as well as on a video both Syrai and I will post to our social medias. The letter did detail their involvement in Barbara's murder, but they denied anything to do with Gary's murder. The claims were that Brad Steckman had completed all the murders. And again, 5 pages of this suicide note, and there was nothing about Christopher and his whereabouts. The last part of the suicide note, Tina dedicated to Skye. She said that Skye was the love of her life, her soulmate. It's pretty fucked up when people have to die so you can find your soulmate. I think this is what it comes down to. Greed. It's been considered one of the worst of the 7 deadly sins. There's a very fitting quote for this story by Bhagavad Gita that says, "Hell has 3 gates, lust, anger, and greed." Tina and Skye seem to have busted through all 3 of those gates, and now they can be soulmates in hell. Thank you, Syrai, for collaborating this case with me. It truly was a wild one. Be sure to check out Syrai's show, Freaky as Fuck, if you haven't already. I absolutely love it. And I love you, Rainbow Warriors. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.